Hello and welcome to the Heat Check, the Miami Herald's Miami Heat Show. I'm David Wilson. I'm joined, as always, on the other line. It's Anthony Chang, our Heat beat writer here at the Herald. Anthony, what's going on?
What's up, David? How are you?
I'm doing all right. Off-season mode a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is second week of the off season. I'm gonna grow up my beard right now.
Yeah.
Like, we have some time. We have more than a month before the draft, month and a half until free agency.
Yep.
Pretty much almost 2 months until summer league. Like, there's some time before before things really start going. Even though, I mean, there is no like the NBA off season never really
Yeah.
gets quiet, right? There's always rumors and speculation and all that, but yeah, we have some time here before really things start to heat up.
Yeah, and obviously draft combine going on this week. We're going to talk about some draft stuff later on in this episode. But first, let's just check in on the NBA playoffs. We are kind of the Final Four is starting to clarify, I think, a little bit. We are recording this Wednesday afternoon. Last night, Denver and New York both went up 3-2 in their respective series. Boston could potentially and probably will close out Cleveland tonight. And then obviously you've got Dallas and OKC. Looks like it could be headed, could go a long way. Could that one could go the distance, it seems like. We talked a little bit last week, just kind of hinting at, some of the stuff that maybe these title contenders this year all have in common. But is there anything that you've been watching over the last week here or whatever that you think is applicable to the Heat situation?
It helps to be healthy.
Yeah.
It helps to have your best player. Like, if you look at the teams right now that are either in the second round or look to be moving on to the Eastern Conference Finals, Boston has been one of the healthier teams all
Yes.
season. Porzingis is out, but they still have Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, probably their two best players still, and also Derek White. I guess you could argue he's one of their two best players at this point. Brunson with the Knicks. And Knicks are dealing with their own injuries, obviously.
Yeah, they're the exception.
They're the exception, right? But they do have the best player available, which the Heat did not. The Heat also dealt with injuries last playoffs as well, Tyler Hero and a few other guys. But they had Jimmy Butler, and that matters. Denver with Jamal Murray and Jokic. So it just helps to be healthy, right? That's number one. Number two, I would say is you look at, Denver's so unique, but the way they win games, I think this is kind of what makes the Heat offense so good much better in the playoffs than the regular season. It's not about really volume of threes or making a bunch of threes. It's about generating quality shots and making tough shots. I think Denver at one point last night had 15 3-point attempts with 3 minutes left in the game or something like that. They just don't need to make threes to win, because obviously they have the best player in the NBA who is so efficient inside the 3-point line. But their defense is really good. Defense wins in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what's made the Heat a really good playoff team. And plus Jimmy Butler hitting all those mid-range shots and getting to the foul line. That's what wins playoff games. And the Heat still have that, but they have to be healthy.
It's funny. The Knicks are, I think, doing the closest thing to a Heat impression this playoffs, right?
Sure.
They have a lot of injuries, which, like you said, the Heat obviously had some injuries last year. And then they play great defense, and they just have the best right now. Jalen Brunson's been the best guy in the playoffs, probably, right?
He's on a Jimmy Butler run right now.
Yeah, exactly. He is. He gets to the free throw line a lot too, and he makes tough shots. Obviously, he's shooting the three better. Better than Jim. They're different players. He's a point guard. He's got to be able to do that. But yeah, I think you're right that there is still you watch this and you're the Heat can do some of this. They can't be. Denver's just way better than them. I think all Heat fans kind of feel that in the East they could certainly be doing what the Knicks are doing, if the bracket had broken a certain way. But yeah, I think you are seeing that the fundamentals of what the Heat do come playoff time, the stuff that maybe hurts them a little bit in the regular season, but the fundamentals of defense and just let your best player do what he can do, that still works to this extent. We'll see. I don't expect the Knicks to beat the Celtics, though, right? No. That's going to be the problem is we might still see that the stuff that the Heat does well is good to get you to the Eastern Conference Finals or something like that. But
not good enough against premier.
But ultimately,
talent.
We're going to probably look at it's probably going to be Boston and Denver in the championship, and those two teams, Denver, like you said, they don't shoot a lot of threes, but those two teams are just talent-wise kind of in, I think, a class above everyone else right now.
Yeah, for sure. One more thing about the Knicks before I move on to the draft. Is there something to be learned about what they did in the midseason where I know that some of these guys aren't available right now with Bogdanovich and OG and all that, but they traded away some of their assets, some of the young players, RJ Barrett, quickly, who they were part of the young core that the Knicks had built, and cashed them in for pieces that maybe fit better around their best players right now. And it worked, right? When OG's healthy, they've been dominant. Is there something to be learned by that of maybe cashing in some of these young chips for guys who better complement your best players? Even Josh Hart last year when they traded for Josh Hart, they've done a good job of that.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways the Heat tried to do it right with Lillard. Obviously, they didn't give up or weren't willing to give up as much. They probably kind of dodged a bullet there. It seems like right now, but yeah, I mean, there's still certain guys I don't know if I would part with Jaime Jaquez. He seems one, he's older, an older rookie or going into his second year now, who seems to be such a good fit around, as a he's Josh Hart, right? He is kind of that exact type of can give you just enough on offense, fights his butt off on defense and rebounding, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, if the Heat are committed, we talked obviously last week all about Jimmy Butler's future with this team, and if they bring him back, if they extend him, or we've got 2 years now, then I know Jovic is really impressive, but maybe you cash in on him, and Tyler Hero, who knows what his value is, and he's in a different situation. A lot of young guys, but it's not that different of a situation like RJ Barrett was, right? I think the difference with the Knicks is RJ Barrett kind of seemed to be tapped out on what he was going to be for them. And, I think whereas Jovic still kind of feels like the sky's the limit with him.
Yeah, he's 20. There's upside there. This is pretty much his first real chance to play this season.
The Hero, what they do with Tyler Hero potentially, which, we hate to always be throwing Tyler Hero into trade rumors, but
the annual tradition, David.
I know, but that's the parallel to me of an RJ Barrett type trade, or even an Emmanuel Quickly. He was also an older, even though he was early in his career, I think he was a little bit older. So it's it's a little different than Jovic and Jaquez, I think, because Jaquez frankly accomplished already more than a lot of those guys, and Jovic is so young. But I mean the Heat. I think the ultimate frustration with a lot of Miami people is that the Heat they keep holding onto their cards for holding onto their chips for the perfect hand, and you never know if the perfect hand's going to come.
Yeah, not to revisit a conversation we've had probably 1,000 times over the past 2 years, but they've tried to cash in some of their chips, right? They
have.
Tyler Hero has been included in trade talks with Kevin Durant and Damian Lillard, and I'm sure some of the other young pieces were as well, whether it was Jovic or Jaquez. I'm sure their names came up in those discussions, especially last year. I mean, Jaquez wasn't on the team during the Kevin Durant thing, but my broader point is they've tried to cash in some of their younger assets for stars. I guess the question now is...
They've been pickier with the star, the Knicks traded RJ Barrett for OG Anunoby, who's
not an all-star. That's the question. Do you now just say, well, we just got to go in and make another... not a lateral move, but not a move for a superstar per se, but a guy who maybe could just improve the depth around Bam and Jimmy and could fit better around, your two best players. Is that the move now, or do you still wait out a star like Donovan Mitchell or Kevin Durant if he really is unhappy in Phoenix or somebody like that? I mean, that's kind of the question, because the clock, if they do extend Jimmy and Jimmy is here next year, the clock is ticking, right? He's gonna be 35 in September. This is it. We say it every year, but this is really it. I don't know how much longer he could be the best player on a championship contender. Some would argue
he might not even. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it is obviously a very interesting offseason for a lot of different reasons, but I think that's one question that we'll find out the answer to this summer. If they're as picky of who they go after with their young pieces.
Yeah, it's got to be the right guy, certainly. But I think also, the big threes don't exist anymore, and they haven't really for other than, every big three that gets put together kind of feels like it turns into a mess, whether it's Phoenix or Brooklyn. So, the Heat, in some ways, like the smarter move might just be to find the perfect fit third guy, which is also, again, like easier said than done.
I mean,
even though it's easier to do than convince Phoenix to trade you Kevin Durant for 75 cents on the dollar, it's still hard to do.
Yeah, and if you look at really the two times they made the finals, or at least some of their deep playoff runs, the one time they made the finals in the bubble was after they made that trade for Jay Crowder and Andre Iguodala, which were kind of an example of that type of trade, right? Where they traded Justice Winslow and a couple of other young waiters for two guys who weren't stars, but Jay Crowder was great.
Yeah,
he complemented.
He was like the fourth best player during that playoff run.
Basically. Yeah, he complemented Bam and Jimmy like perfectly, and then you have Andre Iguodala coming off the bench who gave them really important minutes off the, as a reserve, as an experienced reserve, and played really a lot of important minutes. And then, the year they were the 1 seed was when they got PJ Tucker, who was a free agent. It wasn't a trade, but that was another piece that not a star, but came in and made a big difference. So there is examples in recent seasons of like he making a type of move and it really working really well. So I don't know who that player is this offseason, but I would not be surprised. I know the focus is always on stars and the big names. I would not be surprised if that ends up being the move this year, where they find a way to get a player or players like that to help complement the core they have in place.
All right. Do you want to get into some draft stuff?
Yeah, let's do it. I don't want to go. I mean, I really wait until June. Yeah. I just want to talk about two names per se that have been like popular.
Yeah. Combine going on this week, as we said. So. All right. You wanted to talk about Zach Edey and Bronny James. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with Bronny.
Okay. See us up.
I mean, I guess my question to you would be, would he be drafted if he wasn't LeBron James' son?
He wouldn't even be in the draft if he wasn't LeBron James.
Sure, that's a good point.
And that's not an insult. Like he was, he's like legitimate. He was like a top 50 recruit. Like that. I don't know how high he wound up ranked, but he was legitimately really good in high school. A legitimate prospect. Good athlete he was. I think did very well in some of the testing. A very good defensive player. He would be a guy who would, if he wasn't LeBron James' son, he'd be a 3 or 4 year college player who maybe developed into a really good prospect throughout his career. And, because of his size, he probably was never going to be a first round pick unless he either developed a better jumper or like became, developed into really right now he's kind of like an undersized defensive minded 2. And that those guys don't go in the first round generally. So would he be drafted if he wasn't LeBron James' son? Probably not. But I also think like his career it would be a lot less. Different. It would be like kind of be like more drama free and probably smarter to have him go back to college and try to develop. He was going to the USC thing was a mess. Obviously, I think what he was going to maybe transfer to Duquesne was the rumor. I don't know I think it was like one of LeBron's.
Former high school team.
Yeah, like part of that Akron group was like one of the coaches there. So, the whole thing is just it's impossible to separate one from the other. The Bronny James and LeBron, obviously, for obvious reasons. But I don't think he's like a total like zero as a prospect.
No, definitely not. And look, I think he's like probably projected going to the second round at this point, right? I mean, if he goes in the first round, it would kind of be surprising, and it'd probably be more, and this is not to criticize Bronny, but it'd probably be more because of the LeBron attachment, right? Of like the chance of getting LeBron because you draft Bronny James, like that there is that factor. That
I mean that's part that would be part of why he gets drafted in the second round. I don't think he's going to go somewhere. It doesn't seem now at this point he's just going to go somewhere because of like LeBron's not going to just go somewhere because his son is there, but if you draft Bronny James, it's like it's good marketing. It's like maybe LeBron in a year comes to play with you guys, or after he retires, he's like involved with the franchise. Like there's still that piece of it, but he, as a second round pick, also I think brings a little bit of something to the table.
Yeah, he measured, to your point about him measuring well at the combine, third best max vert at the combine. Yeah. Just athletically really graded out well. I think he came in at 6'1", which I think it was listed like at 6'3" or 6'4" at USC. So a little shorter than expected.
Yeah. Now everyone, that's also, it's always without shoes. They measure
that makes a difference. Yeah.
So
that makes a difference.
He's probably he's probably more like 6'2", 2.5 in shoes.
Yeah.
Which is a difference, but it's not like as crazy as it sounds when you see he measured 6'1" and was listed at 6'4" or 6'5".
Yeah, I think at this point probably his best trait might be on defense, right? Like as a perimeter defender, which he loved those type of guys. So in the second round, at the 43rd pick, I think he's expected I think his over under that I saw the betting line of his over under for where he's gonna get drafted is at 45. So it's kind of right in that space. Did he need another small guard? Probably not, but it would be interesting, right? Like as a person covering the team, selfishly, that would be fun. Like to have Bronny James on the roster and have all the stuff that comes with that, and then all the LeBron James questions will begin. So
I know
it would be kind of fun, and I wouldn't. I mean, they've obviously like the Heat. They scout California really well. Like they're always in LA. Mm-hmm. Because Chet Kammerer is out there, who led their scouting department for years. Now is taking on a different role, but still is like active within that role. So I'm sure they've evaluated him many times and gone out to see him play. So I don't think it's out of the question, but we'll see. I think it'll be fun to talk about leading up to the draft.
Yeah, he does, like, he fits, I think, really well as like a develop. You send him to the G League, you let him develop. Would LeBron want his son to be playing in Sioux Falls? Like, I don't know, but he might have to like relinquish some control over. I think a problem has been how controlled his whole thing has been, obviously, with some of the health scare, like there's like real reasons for it, but I don't know. It would be very interesting to see what if you gave LeBron a lie detector, like where would what would his ideal outcome for Bronny be? I'm kind of, or give him truth serum. I'm kind of curious because the Heat, like you said, in a lot of ways check a lot of boxes. They've done a really good job at developing smaller point guards, right? Like from Kendrick Nunn, Gabe Vincent. They've done a good job. Obviously, they emphasize defense, so the fit is natural there. Sioux Falls is kind of out of the way, right? Like of all the G League markets they go to, it's probably a nice, quiet place to not.
Yeah.
Hard for reporters to get out there to do constant stories
on him.
I'm
sure some will find their way.
Some will make their way, but it won't be like if he's in
Chicago.
Chicago or even Delaware, right? I think the Sixers are in Delaware. Like, it's a quick drive down from New York. It's hard to get out to Sioux Falls, I assume. So it's not crazy to me. This is obviously not a great draft. I don't know a lot about what the consensus is on like the second round type guys now. And the athletic traits are real. And I think there also is a little bit of a bet on not just the pedigree and that like he's LeBron's son, he has those athletic traits, but like, LeBron is 40 years old and still like a freak of nature because of the work he has put in. He's gonna retire soon. It's not a bad, like, LeBron, for as good as he was coming to the league, like there's still not a lot of players who have improved more from day one to like the end of their career than LeBron did. And I think you can bet a little bit on like, this is LeBron's son. He has those genes, but he also like watched his dad put in the work for 20 years.
Yeah.
And can mirror him and copy what he saw him do, but also like, get lessons from him and get advice from him, and we'll see how he responds to like that pressure too. Like, that's impossible to predict. Is like, is he going to be fine with just playing a couple of years, making a couple NBA appearances, and then retiring, or never kind of making it, or is he going to want to be like, I'm LeBron's son, like I need to at least have like a respectable NBA career?
Yeah, and there is some upside there, right? I mean, he's 19.
Yeah.
And like you said, he had the cardiac, the heart situation he dealt with before the season, and that seemed to impact him. So, the further he gets away from that, like maybe we didn't see the
I
true
put
Bronny James
basically
last
no
year.
stock into his freshman year.
Yeah,
Yes.
like that's. I mean,
between that and just how much of a mess that situation was, like,
so there is upside there. There is like some element of like unknown of like if was that just because he had a late start because everything that happened and it was a mess over there. He wasn't playing as much as many expected. Like, is there more there that maybe USC didn't get out of him? Also, I'll leave this quote here by Rich Paul, told ESPN, I don't value a young player getting into the lottery as much as I do getting him on the right team in the right developmental situation. I don't know of another developmental system that's better, or at least is more highly regarded than the Heat's, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about like how would LeBron feel if he would played in Sioux Falls. I mean, if you're looking for him to get into a development, like a good developmental situation, into a good, productive system that has produced guys, undrafted guys into players now making $15-16 million in Max Strus's case, or even more in Duncan Robinson's case, like he is a good situation for him, really, when you think about that respect. So it'll be interesting. Like I don't rule it out, right? Like if he's there at 43 and the Heat want to take a flyer on him, like why not?
Yeah, the only way I can see them doing, or the only way I would like rule it out is if the Heat, if they go totally into win now mode and want to get an older guy in the second round, because this draft, as much as the top of the draft is not that impressive, there are a lot of older, accomplished college players in this draft because of the COVID year. And you look at some of these guys who could be like early, mid second round picks. You've got like a lot of them are guards, so I don't even know if that's what the Heat need, but like Tyler Kolek, Terrence Shannon, Baylor Shireman, like these guys who are all like all-American type talents who the ceiling's not, they're not going to go high in the draft because they're 23, 24 years old, but, we're some of the best players in the country last year. And that obviously doesn't always translate, but if you're looking for someone who can maybe help you out in like a small role this year and then be really like a contributor when you're 25 or 26 in the 25-26 season, then there might be, they could just decide it's more valuable for us to get an old guy here who's ready to go. Because Bronny's probably realistically a couple years away from being a real NBA contributor.
That's fair.
And you're never going to take a second round pick because you're like, this guy's our new starting point guard. But like,
right, I was going to say that, yeah. But there might be a guy that the Heat feels could be more ready to play as a rotation bench guy.
Yeah, exactly.
As a rookie or late in his rookie year, right? I mean, there's not many of those in the second round. Like I guess Josh Richardson was one of them that like they got in the second round and he kind of was an immediate rotation player.
I just think this draft is a little unique because of how like few standout freshmen there were across the country. I mean, the seniors were really stars, and those guys aren't going in the first round for the most part. So, I don't know. It's a very unusual draft where a lot of the biggest names, at least in terms of like college accomplishments, we're not going to be talking about until around when the Heat are picking in the first round and then deep into round two.
Which brings us to Zach Edey.
Yeah. All right. He seems to be the new Heat Twitter fascination after pretty impressive, 7'3". Is that what he measured in at the combine?
7'3". Pretty much like an 8-foot wingspan, which is just I don't know if I've ever seen that before.
Yeah.
Like what was Victor's wingspan last year?
I think this was like the second longest wingspan ever. I think I saw like it's right behind Victor. He shot it pretty well in some 3-point drills. Moves all right for a guy who's 7'3".
Yeah, so really high without shoes, 7'3.75, so 7'4" almost 7'4". Without shoes.
Yeah.
So with shoes, I mean 7'5", like
5, yeah, at least.
Yeah, that big body for sure.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you see any chance that he would take him at 15? I don't think I know there was I think he's going to be a first round pick.
I do too. Definitely. I mean, it seems like some teams have him in the lottery, which is
we'll
a
see.
little bit
the Heat are
surprising.
15, obviously. It's right after the lottery, so.
Yeah, I think most teams have him. What I've seen, top 20, pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, the Heat need size, right? So that's kind of where foundation of fans' infatuation with Zach Edey. Obviously he brings the size. There's no doubt about that. But is it functional size for what the Heat are trying to do? Is the question I guess I would raise, right? Can you play him with Bam Adebayo? I know he shot it well at the combine, but in college he shot 2 threes, I think, over his career. 1 of 2, I believe. So I don't expect Zach Edey just to come into the league and turn into Dirk Nowitzki. He's not going to take 4 threes a game. I'd be surprised if he took 1 a game as a rookie. So unless you're projecting Bam to, and maybe this will happen, but unless you're projecting Bam to start taking 3-4 threes a game, which he did take more as the season went on last year, I don't know how you could play them together, right?
Yeah.
As a backup big, maybe, right? If you just want to have more size off the bench. But then you wonder, can he hold up defensively, in the Heat scheme? Obviously not going to be able to switch with Zach Edey. It's going to be more of a drop coverage type of thing. So can he fit in the Heat system with the way Spoelstra likes to play? Historically, Spoelstra with Bam, at least, as the center, he's gotten the best out of lineups that are smaller, whether it's PJ Tucker at the 4, Jay Crowder at the 4, even Myers Leonard, he was eventually phased out of the rotation when it came to the playoffs. Kelly Olynyk, during the bubble, you're phased out of the rotation when it came to the playoffs. So always defaults to the more athletic, switchable lineup, because that's what Bam is best at. He's best at switching. So I just don't know about the fit. I get the intrigue because, again, the size. He was, the best player in college basketball probably last year, right? Would you say, Dave?
Last 2-time player of the year.
Yeah, so I get it. I just don't know about the fit.
Yeah, I don't know about the fit either. I think, I guess, I think what you mentioned, a backup big, I think that the question is going to be, in this draft, teams in the Heat's position, are you drafting a guy there because you are this guy is a future foundational piece potentially, or are you content to just draft a guy, again, part of what I was talking about in the second round too, because he can fit a role for us? And I know Zach Edey, like you said, not a natural fit next to Bam, not a natural fit with a lot of what the Heat like to do, but if you kind of view him as a gadget player and you're content to take that at 15, a guy who will be the biggest player in the league, who will give you a dimension on both ends of the floor that you have not had, I don't know, since Hassan Whiteside, right? Then I think it can make sense. I think he's an older guy, should be able to help you out, I think, right away. Maybe he can guard, it's a center's league right now. It kind of feels like maybe he can help you in some of those big games against Jokic or Embiid or whoever it might be. But I don't, to me, he does not feel like a Heat guy at all, because they'd have to play defense totally differently than they have at pretty much any time in this Jimmy Butler Bam era.
Yeah, I think that's why that's what I keep going back to. I think he could be score 10 points a game and get 8 rebounds if he plays 20-25 minutes a game.
Yeah.
I think that could happen, right? But I just don't know if he fits what he want to do. Now,
maybe it would be a total change up for the Heat, which maybe they'll do.
Maybe they'll do. That's what I'm saying. It's not like the offense has been great, right? We're talking about the defense, but the offense has been bottom 10 the last 2 years.
And the other thing, players like Zach Edey have not come around.
No.
And I don't even know.
He's unique. Again, he has an 8-foot wingspan. It's just, he's unique. And again, I don't know how he'll be defensively in the NBA. That's going to be no doubt an adjustment for him. And it's probably not going to be a strength for him, at least early on. We see it with guys even Orlando Robinson, right? Who is not as big as Zach Edey. And it's tough for him. Omer Yurtseven, which again, I know Zach Edey is a much better college player than those two guys, but Orlando Robinson and Omer Yurtseven, the main reason they didn't get on the floor as big men, because they were big bodies, they haven't gotten to the floor much, or Omer Yurtseven's on the team anymore, but Orlando Robinson the last few years has barely played, is because on defense, they can't hold up most of the time, right? Whether it's pick and rolls or ISOs or just learning the Heat system, like, and Eric Spoelstra would not put up with that. Like, that's his number one thing. Of like, you blow a coverage 1 or 2 times while you're in the game, like, he will pull you immediately. It won't put you back in the game. So I just don't know if he'll fit on the defensive end for the Heat.
Yeah, I think we'll talk more about the draft as we get closer. To me, there's just better fits and kind of more exciting prospects. And I know it's hard to be more exciting than the 7'5" guy, but better fits and maybe like more helpful, even higher ceiling prospects that I think are going to be around.
Yeah,
where the Heat are, that we'll talk about in the coming weeks.
For sure, I think if you're drafting on need, I think an athletic long wing is kind of what the Heat should be.
Hard to find,
and every team needs them. But I think if you could find somebody at 15 who could put the ball in the basket and is an athletic two-way wing, which again I know is in high demand, that's kind of what the Heat need most, I think, at this point.
Mm-hmm. All right, we can close things out there. You can follow Anthony on Twitter at Anthony_Chang. Follow me on Twitter at DBWilson2. We'll be back sometime here in the next couple of weeks. Dive into the draft at some point. But until then, thanks as always for listening, and we'll talk to you guys later.